So we have already spoken about the basics of Apex triggers, what are Apex triggers, why are those used, and we have also discussed about the syntax of Apex trigger. Now the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to get into some real action. We are going to write an Apex trigger, a simple one, and we will understand the syntax a little more in details, how it is written, etc. So that's what we are going to do. So to write an Apex trigger, this is your Salesforce screen. This is how it usually looks for those who do not have a Salesforce account. Can always go and create a developer edition account, which is a free account, and you will get into something similar to this. I'm assuming if you're at learning Apex triggers, possibly you will have a Salesforce account. So now if you're logged in into this, to write an Apex trigger, there are two ways you can write an Apex trigger. One, you can either go to an object manager and you can go to the object on which you want to write the Apex trigger, and then you can write the Apex trigger there. So that's one option. The other option that is available is basically to go to this developer console, and developer console is the place where you write your Apex code. All right. So these two options are available to you. So we'll go to developer console. We'll take this approach. Go to developer console. It would open up. It will open a different window, developer console window for you. Let me see if it worked. Yeah. Okay. Now this is how the developer console window will look. And what you can do is, okay. Yeah. So this is how the developer console looks. What you have to do is you can simply go to your file, new, and you can choose Apex trigger here. So that's what you have to select. The moment you select that, it would, let me close the other code that is there. Anyways. Okay, so you have your new Apex trigger written here. You can just put in a name for your Apex trigger, whatever name you want to give to your Apex trigger. Let's quickly put a name to this. Let's say my Apex trigger name is T1, or I would say trigger 1. And then you choose the object in which you want to create this trigger. So for us, if I want to create a trigger on account, let's say I would pick that and click on submit. The moment you do this, it would get you the trigger created. So this is the syntax which we are familiar with. This is the name of the trigger, and this is, yeah, so we are already familiar with this particular syntax. So we know the keyword trigger we have to use, and then there is name of the trigger. Trigger 1 is the name that we have used, and this is on account, and this is going to be before insert trigger. Okay, by default it has just taken the event as before insert. You can add more events. So in case you have other events also, we have discussed already about the trigger events. In case I want this trigger to get executed on other events as well, I can add those events also by putting commas. So the next event, let's say you also wanted this trigger to execute on before update, you should have put a comma after this, and you could have written before update here. Okay, so that's something which can be done. All right. Okay, so that's about writing the trigger. Now what I've done is I have actually written a small Apex trigger which we will use for understanding, just to save us some time. So let's go back to Salesforce, and yeah, we are on Salesforce. So I told you there are two ways or two places where you can actually write triggers, right? So I'll go to accounts. So you can simply go to your setup, account manager, object manager. And in object manager, you can simply go to the object on which you want the trigger to be there. So our trigger is going to be an account. So you can basically go on account or any other object. If your trigger is in opportunity, or if it is in contact or lead, wherever it is, you can just go to that object. And if you see the menu here, you would be able to see the triggers option there. And if you click on that, you will see all the triggers which are part of this particular object. All right. So there are several triggers which are available here, right? So I'm basically going to use one of these triggers, or I'm just going to access one of these triggers. I usually prefer to work with developer console because that is a better place for you to write code, etc. So you can also try and use developer console. However, there was an option there where you see the list of the triggers for the object. You have an option to create a new trigger from there also, right? Okay, so I already have a trigger, as I told you, so I'm just going to open that trigger and we'll try and understand the code. Yeah, so you come here, go to triggers, and then there is this trigger called let's search for account. Yeah, this is the trigger that we are talking about, account first. Yeah, we'll open this trigger. Okay, and now we'll try to understand the code in this trigger. So this is the trigger code. All right, this is what we see. So trigger, account first, trigger, and so this is all syntax. We have already discussed about it, right? This is the code block that we have. This is a code block that we are working with. All right, now let's try and understand how do we write this. So trigger, first of all, when we are writing the trigger, what we have to do, we'll have to work with a record which has initiated that trigger code, right? So usually that record is called the record in context. Okay, and to retrieve the value of that record. Now the challenge is that you cannot go and define a new variable for it, etc., because that record is yet to get into the system, the changes are yet to get into the system. So it's not very simple or easy for you to straight away go and pull it using a query or something like that. All right, so Salesforce has provided some variables which are called context variables, which can be used to retrieve the record or the list of records which are being used by that particular trigger. Okay, so what is that context variable? It's trigger.new. So trigger.new is the context variable which is going to be used for us. And trigger.new, what does it contain? It contains the record in context, or basically the records in context. If the trigger is being executed or being called by multiple records, let's say you're trying to upload 100 records through data loader, then of course there are 100 records and the trigger has to go through all those 100 records. So all those 100 records are going to be stored in this variable, right? So now trigger.new is the variable. So think of it as any other variable like S object variable, and it is of type list of S object. And I've already discussed earlier about S object, list of S objects, etc. So I'm assuming that you're familiar with that. In case you're not familiar with that, you can obviously go back and look into some of those tutorials to get a little bit of more understanding around that. So now trigger.new is what? It's a variable, system defined variable. So we are not defining it here. So if you see, I've not defined it here, but I'm able to directly use it. All right. So trigger.new is usually a system defined variable. In our Salesforce terminology, we call it as a context variable. And there are more context variables. I'll talk about context variables a little later. For now, we'll just focus on this. So we already have a ready-made variable which can be used to retrieve the values of the records which are being processed, and then we will execute the logic around that. Okay. So now as part of this trigger, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update the description. So I'll just tell you what exactly we're going to do. So as part of this trigger, we are just going to update the description of the account record the moment it gets created. Okay. And I'm taking a very simple example. This is a very, very simple example. I'm just saying, okay, fine. Just go and update the description of the record with this. Okay, static value, just go and put it in the description. That's it. You're not doing anything else as part of this trigger. So every time an account record is created, it's an insert, it's a trigger which is being called by an insert operation. So before the record gets inserted, just go and update the description. Okay. All right. So now what we are going to do, okay, another important thing, since we are talking about this context variable trigger.new is always of type list. Okay, it is a list variable and it's not, let me try to see if I can do something. Yeah, so this is basically always of type list. Okay, so which means that your trigger that you're writing, or the trigger that you're basically creating, the trigger.new context variable that we have is capable of working with a single record, and it is capable of working with bulk records as well. So you don't have to use two different variables. So Salesforce has kept it simple, because if your trigger is getting executed or called by one single record versus if a trigger is being called by say 500 records, will you use two different context variables? Will make things complex. So for that reason, Salesforce has just given one context variable. Now this is of type list. So if there is a single record, that can be handled with it. If there are bulk records, those can also be handled with this. All right. So now since it is of a type list, you cannot just go and compare this directly, or you cannot just go and say that okay, when update the value of this directly. You'll have to iterate it through a loop. So that's what we have done. So that is the reason why we have put a loop. Okay. Now what we are saying in this loop, we say account A or ACC, whatever you define a variable. Okay. And within this, iterate it through all the records of trigger.new and update the description for each record as this. Right. Now if there are 100 records in this loop is going to run continuously 100 times, and it will go and update the description of all the 100 records. Correct? Very simple. So that's what it's going to do. For now, just don't look at this line of the code. It's commented out, and this line of the code. For now, let's not look into this. For now, let's just look into line number 3 and line number 5, just for our understanding. All right. So this is the code that we have. We have written our trigger code, and it's very simple. So I just have written a loop, and this loop iterates through all the records in the trigger.new, and it basically then updates the description for each of those account records. That's what this trigger is going to do. So now if this trigger is active, so you will have the option to keep the trigger active or inactive. So if you look into these triggers, so now this is the trigger that I'm talking about, right? Account first trigger. This is currently active. The status of this trigger is active, right? So if the trigger is active, then every time you create a new account record, it will go through that it will go through that trigger code, and it will automatically update the description of the account record. All right, that's what we have written in that trigger. Now we will go back to the same trigger, and we are going to make small change to that trigger. Okay, now let us include one more line here, and that line is very simple. So if you the one which is commented out, I'm just going to make change in that. This is commented out. I will remove the comments from here. So it's not doing anything additional. Basically, it's only just going to check if the description equals null. So if there is already some description provided, it will not update the description. Only if description equals null, then only it's going to go and update. So you do not want your trigger to override if there is a description put by the user. All right. And another alternate to this can be you just concatenate the user's description. In case there is a description, just add this also to that description. So I would possibly want you guys to try that, make that change in this particular trigger and see if that works. And if it doesn't work, if you face any challenge, let me know if that is working for you. And if it's not working, if there is any challenge that you're facing, again please let me know on that, and I'll see if I can basically answer that. Okay, so this is one trigger. Okay, now let's go and create or work with one more trigger. Now in this trigger, what we have done, we have just worked with one trigger event, which is before insert. All right, we'll try to work with one more trigger, very simple trigger similar to this, and we'll try to work with multiple trigger events in that. So for that, again, I do have another trigger which I can open from here, which is the account rating trigger. Let's open this one. Okay, yeah, this is the other trigger that we are going to work with. We'll quickly look into this trigger, try and understand the code of this trigger. Feel free to pause the screen and then try to type the code completely on your own. It's very simple. I have just started with a very small simple trigger, so it should not be very difficult for you to write this. You will initially, of course, make some small syntax errors, etc., but that's fine. But that gives you the confidence. All right. So pretty much this first line we pretty much understand. Should not be a problem for us to understand. The only thing that you see different from the previous example is instead of before insert, here we have one more event. So in case you are writing an Apex trigger for 2 events or multiple events, then you will have to keep on adding those events with these comma. So you can basically separate each event with comma. All right. So that is the thing. Now inside this, what I have done, I have just added, everything else remains same. So you have the same context variable trigger.new. I'm going to talk a little more on that context variables a little later, because there is more to know and understand about context variables. There are different types of context variables which are used in different ways. I'll talk about that a little later. We'll not get into that right now. But for now, we are familiar with trigger.new and let's use that. So trigger.new is the list of account records which are getting updated. Now, if you're thinking that, okay, fine, will it always be a list? No, it can be a single record also which is getting updated or created. That's fine. But because it's of type list, it can handle single record, it can handle bulk records as well. All right, so that part is taken care of. So same thing, I think this line is also pretty much what we saw earlier. So same thing is happening. Only difference that you see here is there is an if else condition that we have put. So here what we are trying to do, we are saying that, okay, fine, in case the revenue of an account which is getting inserted or updated, in case the revenue of the account, annual revenue is a standard field in the account, is more than 10 million, I want the rating, account rating, again, this is a standard field, this is a standard field. So I'm using these two standard fields. If an account is being created with an annual revenue more than 10 million, I want the rating to be updated as hot. And if the rating is, if the annual revenue is not more than 10 million, if it is something else, then update the rating as warm, right? Now this trigger is going to work on both the events. It will work for before insert and before update. So every time a record is being inserted, it will work. And every time a record is being updated, this trigger will work. So it will work on both the events, all right? So this is another simple example of a trigger, and you can basically write these triggers. As I said, feel free to pause the screen, write the code completely, and then you have to ensure that the trigger is active. If your trigger is not active, then it's possibly not going to work. All right. So once you have written your trigger, save it. Try to go create an account record and see if it is working fine or not. So let's quickly do a check here. Yeah, let's do a quick check and see if it is working for us. Yeah, so let me go to the sales app here. Yeah, we'll try to create an account record and see if it is working. So I'll just give a name, test account for trigger, something like that, and I'm not putting anything. Let me see if I can put annual revenue. Okay, annual revenue, let's put I put a big value here. Okay, let's see. Now try and save this. Sorry. So save this record. Let's see. I hope some other trigger that I've written earlier, or possibly for some other example, does not cause an issue here. No, it did not, and the record got created. So let's close this. Okay. So see, we did not give the rating automatically. The rating got updated too hot. which is a good thing. And because the annual revenue that we had put was fairly greater than 20 million, so because of that your rating got updated as hot. And yeah, and do we have the description also updated? Let's see, because the description trigger is also active. Where is the description? I am assuming it would have got updated, but no, maybe the description is not on the page layout and that's the reason why they're not able to see that. That's fine. Okay, so which means, you know, at least this trigger is working and it has worked fine. All right, so these are, you know, so a couple of simple triggers that we have already seen how it works and all. You know, it's a good starting point for you. Try to, you know, write these triggers on your own and let me know if you face any challenge.